San Antonio, before I begin, or Mr. Hendricks begins, I'll just give a quick shout out to our diamond sponsor, USAA, and also St. Mary's, for helping this make this event possible. We are grateful for the support of Island, Toyota Tushido Systems, and Spectre Ops. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Anthony Hendricks to talk about Throwback Thursday. Please join me in welcoming the Mr. Anthony Hendricks.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here this morning presenting Throwback Thursday, how cybercriminals are exploiting old vulnerabilities and using past scams to impact all of us. So my name is Anthony Hendricks. I'm a cybersecurity attorney based in Oklahoma City. So while I am a lawyer, I am not your lawyer, and this presentation should not be considered legal advice. Instead, think of this as a conversation between friends, but if you need legal advice, please, please, please find a local lawyer that can help you. I also host a cybersecurity podcast that focuses on exposing underrepresented groups to the field of cybersecurity and data privacy. So everyone loves throwbacks. I even included a throwback picture of baby Anthony at his graduation from Howard University. So every Thursday, people flock on social media and they post throwback pictures, they post old memories, and cybercriminals are doing the same thing. They're going after old exploits that all have available patches that are unpatched in systems, and they're going back to classic scams to target each and every one of us. So what exactly are we going to be talking about today? Well, I always like starting every cybersecurity presentation with just a quick discussion of cyber risks, cyber threats, and their legal consequences. Then we'll talk about throwbacks. We'll then talk about a few examples of throwbacks, and we'll talk about the Jay-Z rule. And we'll also play a game if everyone's okay with that. We'll then talk about why throwbacks work, before we talk about ways to create better memories. And then if we have a little bit of time left, I'll talk about how Oprah Winfrey can make everyone in here a little bit safer. Does that sound good? All right, so let's rock and roll. So cyber risk. So let's look at last year. So there was a slight decrease in the number of data breaches. So you may be saying, okay, that's great, a slight decrease, right? But we actually saw a large number of victims to these breaches. So a lot of people received notices that their information was caught up in a data breach. And so what's the reason for this large number of victims? Well, there's three kind of big factors. One, mega breaches, these large data breaches. Also, zero-day vulnerabilities, and then finally, throwbacks. So mega data breaches, 85% of victim notices were because of 6 data breaches. So if we would have not had these 6 incidences last year, we would have saw a big decrease in the number of people who were impacted by data breaches. And so you're probably all aware of all of those big data breaches because they had all the headlines, right? Also, another reason for this number of increase of victims is zero-day vulnerability. So when you hear 0 day, it just means that you're probably gonna have a bad day, right? The number of 0 days was actually lower than 2023, but it still was a primary cause for the number of victims who received notices last year. So cybersecurity incidences create huge costs for businesses and organizations, right? The average cost of a data breach globally in 2023 was 4.4 million plus. In the United States, the average is almost $10 million. These are big, big numbers. They have big consequences for businesses and organizations. But also cyber risk equals legal risk, and that's where the lawyers get involved. Right, there's been a number of lawsuits being filed after cybersecurity incidences. There's been a number of enforcement actions from regulators and industries. And so cybersecurity risk equals legal risk for businesses and organizations. And so I often talk about businesses and everyone says, well, what about me, right? What about me? Cyber issues aren't just a business issue. It's costing each and every one of us so much money, right? Personally. So now let's get to our main topic. Throwbacks. So throwbacks are causing a ton of chaos. 40% of vulnerabilities exploited by attackers in 2024 were from 2020 or earlier, and 10% were from 2016 or earlier, right? And so these throwbacks are simply vulnerabilities, exploits that are publicly known about, where a programmer, developer, software creator created a patch, and you apply the patch, and you are no longer have that vulnerability, and people are failing to apply those patches. So, throwbacks and ransomware, right? They go together. While phishing attacks are probably the most common way that attackers get into your system when it comes to ransomware attacks, 32% of ransomware attacks in last year started through throwbacks, started through these unpatched vulnerabilities. And when we have throwbacks involved, it leads to more expenses for businesses. Why is that? It's largely because when the insurance company finds out that you had a vulnerability where there was a publicly available patch and you didn't apply it, we're not going to cover this incident. So now you're going to have to pay for everything out of pocket. So throwbacks are really, really expensive for organizations. So what does this look like? Well, earlier this year, the FBI and CISA issued a joint advisory about ghost ransomware. And they've been targeting schools, they've been targeting hospitals, and they've been doing this by just looking for known vulnerabilities that have a patch and looking for organizations that have not applied the patch. And so the best way to talk about throwbacks is to look at actual examples, right? And every time I use real world examples, people come up to me after the talk and they say, well, why did you talk about this example? Why did you pick on this organization? You know, why are you being mean to this company? And I am not attacking anyone. Instead, I am following what I like to call the Jay-Z rule. So what exactly is the Jay-Z rule? Well, Jay-Z once rapped, Hov did that, so hopefully you wouldn't have to go through that. And so we're gonna talk about some of these examples so that hopefully no one in this room will have to go through what they go through. Sounds good? All right, so let's look at an example. Equifax data breach 2017, you saw this, all the headlines, right? 140 million consumers had their information stolen. 2 Chinese nationals were charged with exploiting a vulnerability in Apache struts that allowed them to get into the system. And so this was an unpatched vulnerability that allowed them to get in the system. And so some of you who are probably more familiar with this may be saying, hey, that's a little bit unfair. That patch came out pretty close to when the incident happened. You're being unfair. You're picking on them, all right? So let's look at another example. And I want to play a game that anybody who's on social media, you have kids, they've probably done this, you probably heard about this trend. It's called We Listen and We Don't Judge. All right, so I'm going to talk about another example. We're going to talk about the city of Baltimore in 2019. They were a victim of a ransomware attack that kind of decimated all of their city services, right? They were unable to do many things in the city for a large period of time. And so there was some debate about whether the stolen NSA exploit internal glue was used, but the city of Baltimore did something. They did a report about how this happened. And in the report, it talks about how they had a number of legacy systems, how they hadn't applied patches for years and years and years. So even if that exploit wasn't used, they admitted, hey, we didn't even apply that patch that was given 2 years ago that would have stopped it. So it could have been this exploit because we hadn't patched our system in almost 2 years, right? All right, so let's talk about another example. But remember, we listen and we don't judge. All right, so January of this year, Oracle Health, formerly another company purchased by Oracle, they had a cybersecurity incident where they were able to get into their system and access servers and copy patient information. And the criminals used an unpatched vulnerability in Oracle Access Manager from 2021. So that looks really bad because the company was purchased by Oracle and they didn't apply the Oracle patches from 4 years ago, right? So this is still happening all the time. And so let's talk about it from the scamming perspective. So what I did is I went to the FTC's website and they have these wonderful charts for various years of the top kind of scams, right? And they're all different years, but they largely look the same because they are the same scams, the same exploits. You probably heard so many articles, read so many things about how scammers are using AI to trick us and all those things. And yes, that is happening, but a lot of these people are just going old school. So I wanted to talk about one specific example because a lot of times when we talk about these scams, people are like, oh, we're not taking this serious, right? Gift card scams, right? No one falls for that. That's the simplest thing. But it's cost us millions of dollars every single year. And it's not just, older Americans falling for it. It's all types of people. It's CEOs. It's even fraud professionals who fall for it. ARP has this article about how one of their leaders of their fraud division actually fell for one of these gift card scams. So if someone who teaches people how to do it falls for it, means that it's a serious issue. So in 2023, card draining and gift card scams made up $217 million of the record high $10 billion in issues. And so this is a big problem, and it's a very, very basic how they go about it. And so here are some headlines showing that this is still an issue, and they aren't using anything very, very tricky here. They're using the same thing they used in 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and this year. So why do throwbacks work, right? You may be saying, hey, why are people falling for these throwback scams? Why are we falling for these throwback attacks, right? Well, it's us, right? We're the problem. And because we're the problem, we are also the solution, right? And so before we can get to solutions, we got to talk about our problems. So the first is that we fail at training. And I always like to use this gif of LeBron talking to Austin Reeves, and you can see his face. He looks really, really confused when LeBron is teaching. And that's usually the face that people make when I give cybersecurity trainings at companies. They look pretty confused. Right? We often fail at training, and studies have found that employees who receive traditional training on cybersecurity issues only perform marginally better than people who haven't taken training at all. Okay, so we have a training problem. Also, fundamentals, right? The majority of us fail at just the basic fundamentals, right? A majority of online adults can identify strong passwords. That's great, but they really can't go beyond that into things that are commonplace right now, things that can help us. And we don't get the basics right? 80% of successful data breaches are the result of compromised credentials, right? It's just the fundamental, basic things that we fail at. Also, cybersecurity culture, right? You're wondering why an organization isn't patching up their systems with patches that are available. Right? It's a culture problem, right? You're not getting a lot of buy-in from the top. That's creating a culture where cybersecurity is appreciated, cybersecurity is important, and so that leads to issues. We also lack security policies and basic programming. 47% of small businesses don't have any kind of cybersecurity policy in place. According to a number of sources, nearly 60% of organizations don't have a patch policy, right? And so you can't blame someone for not applying patches if you don't have a policy in place telling them that who's responsible for applying the patches. And when companies do apply patches, they wait, right? And on average, it's 102 days for you to apply a patch. And so if it is a critical patch, you're not gonna have it in place because you take so long to apply those patches. Another issue is we let fear and we let pressure win, right? And so when companies do have policies in place, people are reluctant to apply patches because your fear is, all right, I'm gonna apply these things or I'm gonna do these updates and it's gonna mess up everything that I have in place. And I'm gonna have to spend all of this time fixing it, when right now my system is running absolutely perfect. Also, it's time consuming, right? From a business standpoint, no one wants their computers down, right? Sometimes applying these patches requires you to shut down for a period of time. And business owners will tell you, no, we don't want to do that. We need to be up and running. We need to be making money. And so we allow this fear, we allow this pressure to control, and that leads to issues for all of us. So how do we create better memories? How do we create better throwback issues, right? Well, the first thing we do is understand that it's not all doom and gloom, right? We can do little things right now to make ourselves and our organizations safer. So the first thing we do is train better. And so we started with the picture of LeBron and Austin Reeves, where Austin Reeves was confused. And then the next year, it's Austin Reeves training, the rookie on the team, giving him advice, and he looks confident. And so we need to train better based on how people learn things, how people memorize. And so when we want to talk to people about cybersecurity, about staying safe online, we need to remember that people can only focus on 6 to 9 new pieces of information before there's a steep drop off. And so understanding how people think and how people learn makes us better trainers. And so it's a slow process, but if you do it right, people who take in training can become leaders where they can talk to other people about cybersecurity issues. We also need to focus on risk-based training, right? We need to understand what our risks are. We should have personalized training based on topics, based on job responsibilities, so that everyone is prepared to deal with these types of issues. Well, the next is healthy skepticism, right? That's one of the things that they talk about for cybersecurity, where you're going to be asking questions. So everyone needs to channel their inner soldier boy and say, yo, I don't believe that, that's fake, that's photoshopped, right? You need to be a little bit more cautious. You need to take that one extra second to ask a question. And so social engineering often leverage psychology and our natural decision-making process. They want to speed us up, right? They want to get us to make quick decisions. And so if you can just take an extra moment and ask an extra question, figure something out, that helps you combat that, right? And so we're going to look at an example about asking questions. And we're going to talk about romance scams. And so romance scams cost consumers tons and tons of money, over $1 billion last year. And that's a huge sum of money. And so you should be saying in your head, well, maybe she's just not into you, right? If the person you're dating online keeps making excuses about why they won't meet you in person, well, maybe she might not be into you. If you're getting requests for money and you've never met in person, you should be asking yourself, that sounds funny. Maybe she's just not into you. You know, if you're being asked by the person you're dating online for money via gift cards or cryptocurrency, you should be thinking in the back of your head, maybe she's just not into you, right? Asking those extra questions, having some healthy skepticism can keep us all safer online. Also, when we talk about patching, we should have a patch management program. I'm not here to sell you anything, but it is just a process of allowing you to balance your cybersecurity needs with your business needs. If you have a policy in place, that means everyone's on the same page about what you need to be doing, when you need to be doing, and who is responsible for doing it. And so there are several steps in patch management. I won't talk about all of them, but I want to talk with step number 1, which is probably the most important thing, right? You need to create an inventory of your software, of your systems. The thing about it is, when I looked at the report from the city of Baltimore about patch management, and they talked about creating a policy, they found out when they started to do an inventory that they didn't know what all systems, all software they actually had on their system. And they were just like, I would have never patched this up because I didn't know we were still using this. And so there were some systems and some software that hadn't been patched in 10 years because they just didn't know about it. And so the most important step is to do an inventory. Find out what systems you're using. Find out if you're using any legacy software. Is there some way that you can use something else instead? So what did we learn, right? As we talked about earlier, people forget about half of all new information as soon as they get it. And so you're probably gonna go back home and people are gonna be like, hey, you spent your Saturday going to BSides. And they'll look through kind of the agenda and they'll say, oh, there's somebody talking about throwbacks. What exactly did you learn? And you're gonna be like, oh, I can't remember, but he did a great job and I love his tie, right? But I am here to help. So here are 6 things right in that sweet spot that we learned today, so that hopefully when someone asks you, what did you learn at BSides, you're able to talk about at least just one thing, right? So while new tools and exploits garner a lot of headlines, criminals often target known unpatched vulnerabilities too. Every year, the same scams cost Americans billions of dollars. 3, cyber risk continues to grow and it is costly for all of us. 4, throwbacks are one of the leading causes of the increase in data breach victims. 5, These throwback scams and vulnerabilities work because of our weaknesses in training, missing policies, and fear. And then finally, better training, healthy skepticism, and creating patching policies are key. All right, so I think we still have some time here. So here's, if you'd like to talk, you can scan the QR code, it'll take you to my website. And this afternoon, the slides will be loaded up when I get back to the hotel so that you can have it. But it'll also be the place where you can see some of the slides from other presentations. So we have more time, so let's talk about Oprah. All right. So Oprah is one of my favorite speakers. And what I love the most about Oprah is that she gives free stuff, right? You get a car, right? So what I did is I came in a little bit earlier and I put under somebody's seat a free gift. So if you can all just look under your seat, right? I'm joking. I ain't got the budget for that, right? I don't have the budget for it.
You scammed me.
Hold on. I didn't scam you. I do have something for free. Absolutely for free. If you scan the QR code, it'll take you to my website and you can get the 5 cybersecurity mistakes that you are probably making. Absolutely free of charge. You don't even have to give me your email address. That's when I say it is free. It is absolutely free because like Oprah, I like to give free gifts. And so every presentation I end with this slide because I always like to thank the lawyers that work with me because they allow me to go out and come to these conferences and talk about cybersecurity, especially the young associates who work on the cases with me because they are working, which allows me some extra time to kind of get away to come to these conferences. And so if we have any questions, I'm here to answer them while we still have a few minutes left with our time together. If not, I'll be around hanging out and you can bump into me. I'm easy to find. I'm the one guy in the suit at this whole conference. All right. Well, thank you so much.
I have a question. How do you take what you're saying and apply it to this or your personal computer?
Easy. When Microsoft tells you, hey, we have an update for you, and you have that option to click ignore or to update, what do? We stop what we're doing and we update, right? We have that all the time. People will click ignore. Even when it comes to like phone updates, they'll wait to the last moment and you'll tell them, hey, you can't use our system anymore until you apply that most recent updates. And then we'll allow you access back. And so if you just say, all right, I'm gonna stop what I'm doing and I'm gonna apply these updates as they pop up, then you've gotten yourself a little bit safer and no cost for yourself. Anyone else?
Kind of tangentially related, but what do you think about the ethics of delaying victim notification in data breaches at the recommendation of like breach response teams?
So
like you have, I don't know, large university, school, hospital, whatever it is, they have a data breach of some kind, they call their crisis response team, which is a whole bunch of lawyers, et cetera, and they say, don't tell anybody. And they don't get notified for like 6 months that their credentials are out there.
So largely the delays, at least for the good ethical lawyers, is based on what your breach notification laws actually say, right? A lot of times those breach notification laws.
I'm talking about the ethics of it as opposed to legality.
All right, so let's talk about ethics, right? Sure, you want to tell people as soon as you find out, right? But what are you telling them? You're usually not telling them anything, right? You're saying, we had an incident, I don't know if it involves you, I don't know what information was accessed.
Right? I have a huge data breach. Your credentials are out there now. If the notification had occurred, I could go on have I been owned and I would find out about it, right? But now I've got credentials that have been breached for 6 months and I'm still using them, right?
Yeah, no. So I always try to balance, right? From my standpoint, it's you should notify people as soon as you're able to tell them something that is, we know what happened, or at least a little bit, and we know that you were impacted so that they can protect themselves, right? And so that's what it is as soon as you're able to kind of tell them that, because oftentimes people will be like, hey, I want to tell them that we had an incident, and I'm like, well, what are you going to tell them? Well, that we're investigating, and I'm just like, okay, but it's not helpful to the person because they start to panic because you can't tell them, you know, whether they've been impacted. So you may be saying, oh, I'll just go onto that have I been pwned website. That your information might not even be there yet.
Right, but
So-
I mean, not just personally, but I think in a larger context, the risk balance for the individual to just change their password, even if you're not, like, you should do
So
that
if
on
it's just
a regular basis.
Yeah, if it's just credentials, then I
Especially
told
since-
people to push those out if it's just credentials, but if it's like your actual kind of data that we have, I kind of wait until we figure that out. If it's just all just passwords and credentials, then I tell them kind of, hey, send that out or do a force where everyone has to update their passwords when they log in the next time. And so that's what we'll do until we're able to kind of send out actual notices that tell people like, here's the full scope of what happened.
So if there was a legal requirement based on legislation, do you think that is a reasonable thing to put out there for legislation to require, like, for that to be pursued legally? Here's the requirement, there's a data breach, notification has to occur within such and such amount of time.
Yeah, it'll just leave people giving notices that don't tell anybody. Right. Yeah, it'll just be stuff, like, yeah. So I understand. Yeah, it'll just be unused. So I appreciate it. Oh, yeah.
I got one question just out of curiosity. You work for a law firm, correct?
Yeah.
So the law firms have been targeted recently for the sensitive data they hold. What's the industry doing to, like, you know, because you have large firms and small firms, what are y'all doing to protect yourselves?
It depends on what firm you're talking to. Some firms do a lot, and some firms do very, very little. And so a lot of it is like buy-in. Like every time we talk about technology, a lot of my law partners think about it as cost, as how much money is Anthony asking me for. And so when they think about it as cost, it makes them reluctant to do the things that are right. When you kind of balance it and say, hey, if you don't invest in this, if we do have an incident, you know, it'll be $10 million when you can pay, you know, for these kind of enhancements. And so our focus has really been on helping these smaller firms because a lot of times they don't do it because of resources. And so it'll be about resources with them. And then for bigger firms, it'll be getting buy-in from all of the partners about why this is a good investment. So it's two different conversations that are happening right now. And so I think a lot of the bigger firms are kind of realizing it once there's been some lawsuits, law firms getting sued. They were like, oh, okay, yeah, we need to be kind of focused on it. But for the smaller organizations, it's a different conversation because they're just like, you know, I'd love to, but I just don't have the resources because we're a 5-person firm or a 2-person firm or a solo practitioner. And so you talk about the small things that they can do to make themselves a little bit safer.
And that's because the small firms don't normally have like an instant recovery plan or, like you had mentioned earlier, policies, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Basic things.
Yeah, if you're a 2-person firm, like you're like, a policy for what? Well, I'll just go and ask my other law partner and we'll have a quick conversation about what we're gonna do. So yeah, so what do you got?
So, go back to your first slide, this is not legal advice.
Yep.
You're walking into a situation, what's your ideal situation, and what's the one where you're just pro?
So when you're walking in, like no one calls me on a good day. Like I never get phone calls where it's like, hey, we're having a company barbecue. Why don't you come through and get a plate? Like I never get those phone calls. So anytime they call me, it's a bad situation, right? And so when you're walking into a bad situation, they're all bad. For me, the best situation is where everyone wants to work together and they aren't adversarial to the lawyer, right? Because anything else we can fix, right? We can figure it out. We can get you to a better place. But if I'm walking in and people are pointing the finger at each other, nobody wants to talk to the lawyer because they think that they're going to get in trouble, then that's a bad situation. But if everyone has a good attitude, we can figure it out, right? We can resolve, you know, almost anything, right? And so that's kind of the ideal situation is where everyone's willing to work together.
So in your experience, most likely you wear 2 hats. You're the legal and sometimes you're the PR.
So I am not PR, so I am legal. Now they will send a statement to me that their PR person has written, and I take my pen and be like, yeah, don't say that. We don't know. Nah, not about that. Try again. And so that's my role. So I'm not gonna draft a statement. I'm gonna be looking at it and be like, well, what does that even mean? a lot of times people will say, and we're gonna give you an update on everything that happened tomorrow. And I'm like, are we? Do you think we're gonna be done? You know, maybe we'll have another kind of statement come out with some updates, but you know, so that's kind of my job, and I won't write kind of the PR statement. I'll just look at it and make sure that people aren't, you know, being a little bit ridiculous. So yeah. All right, well, thank you so much. It's really fun. Thank you.